And then I'll spend a little time talking about what the purpose of this event is. It's a good thing to know what the purpose is 30 seconds before you do it, right? Yeah. So you know what to aim for. Just for those who don't know, I'm Frank Cole. I'm director of the Gemstone program. And Kristen?
I'm Kristen Scandal, the associate director of the Gemstone program.
I'm Bob Newcomb, professor in the ECE department.
And the mentor for the team.
Yes,
Yeah, you sure are.
I'm Robin Dassler. I'm the engineering librarian and the team librarian.
Okay. And our other experts?
Yes, I'm Valerie Gabeau. I'm here from Transportation Services.
Okay.
I'm Mike Levengood. I'm here from the bicycling coordinator, University of Maryland, and the bike share administrator.
Very good. Well, thanks for your help with this. So, Team Bikes. I'll let you take care of it yourself, how you want to do that. But just a few housekeeping ideas for you to think about. This is the first time you're going to get feedback from a variety of perspectives. Okay, there's some of us who are just casual bike users and think about campus functions, and there's some of us who are avid bike users, I think, and live and breathe this stuff, as they say. The transportation folks, the engineering folks, the how we're going to make this work folks. You can get a lot of feedback, hopefully. It's all meant to build you, grow you to a better product down the road. It's all meant to be constructive building blocks for you to utilize. You can challenge us if you think we have it wrong. We can challenge you if we think you have it wrong. But it's all meant to end up so when you get to your thesis a couple years from now, you have a better product. Okay, and this event is to kind of set the stage for making sure that you establish those lines of communication within your team and with the experts that you have in your community to make sure that you take all those resources to heart as you're getting down this path. So that's it. Anyone else want to say any welcoming things? No? If not, it's yours.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you all for coming. I know you guys are all busy, but thank you for your time. And Emily, if you want to start off?
Well, first I want to introduce the team members we have up here. Here we have Isaac. This is Josh. Kyle. My name is Emily. And this is Luke. And we'll be presenting for you today. For those of you who aren't entirely familiar with the concept, bike shares are a relatively new, I guess, phenomena in this country. They started, the automated bike share as you know it, started in just a couple years ago in 2010 with Capital Bike Share in Washington, D.C. So bike shares, though they're new, have the data that's coming in about them is already very positive. In the communities that have bike shares, there's been a rise in awareness of the benefits that bicycling can bring in terms of sustainable transportation and a healthier lifestyle. So our argument, next slide please, is that in order to really grow this trend, it would be beneficial to introduce bike shares in a strong way, in a way that students can really connect with them on university campuses. This gets an entire generation of people used to the idea of a bike share and used to relying on bikes for transportation rather than cars, or even foot transportation. It becomes something they're used to. But the way we look at it, the current bike share isn't well suited to college campuses. The current bike shares rely on stations. So if a student is trying to get from point A to point B in what isn't actually all that large space, then they have a couple of options. One could be, hopefully, to use a bike share. But if they have to walk to a station, ride that bike to the next station, drop that bike off, and then walk to whatever class they're going to, that may be a longer time than it would have taken them to just walk from point A to point B or use bus transportation. So this difference arises because students are more interested in minimizing their total travel time. It's less of an issue for them of the often last mile transportation is referred to as a use for bike shares, getting people from the large hubs of transportation over to the smaller destinations. But this isn't what a college campus is like. So the stations, putting stations on a bike share designed for students on a college campus is problematic in that these stations are expensive and they make the whole system inconvenient for student use on campus. So our solution to this is to create a stationless bike share enabled using smart locks. The smart lock would take the place of the bike station in providing security for the bikes, but it takes advantage of existing infrastructure like bike racks. So the smart lock, whoa, go back please. It not only reduces the cost of implementing a bike share because you've eliminated the stations, but it also makes these products something that students can really connect with. It's something that they can take this bike wherever they want and drop it off, and they can find it again using the internet, something they're very familiar with. So, and all at the same time, it improves theft prevention so that it would enable a bike share on campus that wasn't confined to stations. So, in order to accomplish this objective, we've broken our team down into 4 subgroups. And the subgroups, this is the overall, I guess, plan for each group. Our survey team will be working on getting us feedback from the community. The RFID team is working to create a way for our users to access and unlock the smart locks. Locking is creating the lock itself. And geolocation is working with GPS to report back where these bikes are. And as you can see, all these teams rely on each other. These processes have to finish together in order to come up with the end product, and they rely on input from the survey team. And our end product is to create a proof of concept of a stationless bike share. We're here to say that here's the smart lock, this could enable a stationless bike share, or it couldn't. So these are our the way that different groups work towards the end goal. And with that, we'll get into the nitty-gritty.
So to get to this goal of producing a proof of concept, we need to really tailor it to the University of Maryland community because no one else is doing this. We come in with the unique aspect that we are students here, and so we have our own experiences. And then we also need to gather the experiences of the community. So really understanding what the problems are for University of Maryland students and what we can do to really address those as a product is really critical for all of our teams to function. So we're going to do this by initially working with creating 2 surveys. We're really keen about understanding what lock would be most useful for students. So we're going to develop a locking survey that's aimed at where the lock should be, what kind of shape it is, and what kind of interaction it should be with the user. And this will really help the mechanical research topic develop their product and will become an iterative loop for them. We also want to get an idea of what the social, the community side of this is, and what features people would want out of the software side of it, locating it, that sort of thing. And that will feed into the RFID and geolocation research topics. In order to interact with the community, we'll need to get IRB approval. So we've begun that process, and we'll finish that this semester. Looking ahead towards the end of the semester and in next semester, we're actually going to begin, next slide please, we're going to begin sending out these surveys. To make sure we get a random population and make sure we really represent the community, we're going to request an email address list from the registrar that's random. And this way we can target University of Maryland students that are bikers, non-bikers, students, all sorts, and we want to really cover our whole basis there. And especially we want to minimize our bias that our own team and other Gemstone students may have for it. So once we get the data back, we're looking immediately as on a per finished basis that we report back to the team and really present this data in a way that they can then run with it and really bring it into their own projects.
All right. Next is the RFID. Next is our RFID team. And when we first came up with the idea of a smart lock, we really wanted to know, we wanted it to be keyless, and we need to wait for the users to be identified by the system. And thinking back on it, we were relying between NFC, RFID, and barcodes for a little bit, and we decided that the RFID technology which encompasses NFC, would be the best way to go for user identification. Yes.
You just identify those acronyms.
Yes. RFID stands for Radio Frequency Identification Technology. So the way it works is there's an active member and a passive member, and when the passive is brought towards near the active, they communicate with wireless signals and provide secured information or credentials. And right now, we have decided to choose the RFID, and at the moment and also to rely on commercially available RFID technology that we'll put together on our own to make a system that's unique to our smart lock. And at the moment, we are looking at the available RFID technologies. These are some of the ones that we are looking at. Next one, please. And once we narrow down our list of RFID technology to about 3 or 5, we want to buy those and take and put them under hardware and software testing. The hardware testing is going to rely heavily upon minimizing power, maximizing security, and also maximizing convenience for users. For software, there are many available software available for RFID technology, so we want to take one of those and change it to fit our purposes the best. And also we need to, for hardware, we also need to account for the fact that it's going to be outside and see how it's going to survive in the weather. And after that, with the feedback from the survey, by the end term, we want to produce our own system unique to our own smart lock that will hopefully be easy for students to access and use and secure as well, so to prevent theft and vandalization.
Alright, so building off that, what he was saying about trying to keep the lock secure, we want to design a lock so that it's capable of keeping our bike secure without the station and still be able to be found with the GPS and the geolocation. So what we're going to start with is there are 3 major bike locks in existence now. You have the cable lock, the chain lock, and the U-lock. And the most common materials are steel, titanium, and a nickel-titanium alloy, which is currently being used by the Navy, which we want to look into. Next slide, please. The idea is to do tests on each material and on each lock design in such a way that we can get concrete, hard numbers. So we want to, thieves commonly use tools such as bolt cutters, wire snips, and angle grinders to get through these locks to steal the bikes. And we want to use methods that simulate those types of attacks in order to determine what the best lock and best materials would be to design a bike lock and keep our bike secure. Once we have determined testing, we need to find our lab and carry out these tests. We will be able to analyze and compare which aspects of which locks and which materials are best to suit our needs so that we can have it secure but still be flexible and mobile and easy for users to use and lock around bikes to, thank you, Rex.
So one of the main points of our bike share system is the removal of the stations, or the docking stations, where people could just come and grab the bikes. Unfortunately, when we remove that aspect of it, we also remove the user's ability to find the bikes wherever they are. So the geolocation research topic involves a means for the users to be able to find them easily, where in phase 1 we just look at commercially available hardware such as the Arduino, GPS shield, and we need a means of transmitting that data to the website, which is where the GPRS shield comes in. You're probably familiar with 3G or 4G cell networks. GPRS is essentially 2.5G. It takes a pre-existing network and adds internet capabilities to it. So we want to be able to send it, regardless of wherever you are. We need to have that data sent to the end product, the website. So phase 2 is the website development and the equipment testing. So the website we want to be able to have capable of pulling up on any browser, any mobile device even, where the user could just open up a map of the campus and find where all the available bikes are. While this is going on, the equipment testing will be done in phases where the Arduino is the microcontroller worked with GPS or just the GPRS, just in phases to make sure every component is working individually before we integrate them all together. And then once both the website and the integration of the equipment is done, we want to integrate both of them together, where instead of sending files to the website to test the locations thing, we want to be able to walk around campus with our unit that will go on a bike and see that pop up on a computer, making sure that it is where the bike is actually located.
So this is our prepared budget at the moment. This is just a very rough list, as we're not sure how much we're actually going to need to buy or how much we're going to burn through and how much we were going to save. But just from each team, we asked for a rough estimate based on current prices of things that we need to buy, and as a result, our total budget at the moment is about $4,000. And to account for this budget, we have applied to the sustainability grant at UMD, and we were hoping to hear back on March 20th around. So, any questions?
All right, thank you. All right, well, good. That's a nice introduction. We traditionally start our questions and answers with our guests who took the time out to be here. So if you all have some burning issues you'd like to bring up, let's get into them.
Yes, we do. We have some.
Yeah.
So my personal expertise, and Michael's, I'll speak for you to an extent, is not in the technology, as I'm sure you probably imagined. You didn't really address it in your presentation, but it's a good chunk of what we have from your written proposal. The comparison of what you're planning to do or hoping to do to what would be a capital bike share program that is currently implemented, which it's not. So there's a chunk of your survey content that is more or less irrelevant to what you're currently working toward. That aside, I don't think that's so relevant. What I think you should consider doing for your surveys and for your focus groups is, rather than addressing what you believe is a population of bike share users and cyclists, you should be targeting people who do not currently bicycle. So the notion behind a bike share system is that you're capturing people who aren't currently riding bikes. Of course, the data that you'll get from current cyclists is relevant, but that's not really your target audience for end-to-end product of the bike share system. So let that be one of your, I think that is a very important guideline that you should be considering. Next, I'm actually going to start filtering through these so I don't go too far out of order. With regard to the locking, you mentioned that you were hoping to get user data for what people think is the easiest way to lock their bikes, and you include the option for people to say, yes, I use a cable lock, this is why I use a cable lock. That shouldn't be relevant at all. What you should be going for in terms of a locking system should be the absolute most secure. It should be the most efficient version of the most secure system that you can come up with. Right now that's a U-lock. You agree, Michael?
Universally preferred is a U-lock.
So
it's not totally undefeatable, but it's the best one.
So it requires the biggest tool, the most obvious tool. Doesn't require so much time once you get there with the tool, but so I mean that should be a consideration.
Ours takes 3 seconds. The tool we have.
Michael puts locks to shame, but that certainly should be a consideration. You might also head to the police to see what they have in terms of bike theft statistics. Michael keeps some, and we can definitely share that with you. But theft is of course, also a very important consideration. But bike theft on campus is probably not what you think it is. Certainly, there is anecdotal data that suggests that lots of bikes are being stolen, but they're either locked in properly, or they've been left for a really long time, or parts of the bikes have been stolen, and then whoever the bike belonged to, they just are like, nah, don't want this anymore. So over time, bikes go missing, but a bike that's being used every day that's locked properly, it's not so common that the bike would be stolen. So there's you're putting a good amount of emphasis, and justifiably so. It's an expensive system that you're hoping to set up, but with a U-lock, with proper education in terms of how one might lock the bike, and with a well-designed bicycle, a lot of your concerns regarding theft should become less. Okay, let's see, what else do I have? Bike share stuff. Do you have anything while looking, Michael?
Well, we totally agree with your concept. We've pushed
we
the
do.
state. The state is the one that pushed for capital bike share because of the links. We were campaigning for a stationless bike share system now. Are you familiar with SOBI? S-O-B-I? Okay, because I haven't had a chance to research it much because we were locked into this capital bike share, but that seems to be somewhat similar. I'm not going to, as far as it's stationless, and things like that. I don't know that I like your concept of the lock and everything, but I don't know that, one thing I do know is that no matter what lock we deal with on campus, no matter how good it is, you really do have to make it somewhat pretty much weatherproof, because that locking mechanism still could corrode, and then if it doesn't work, it's going to be a frustration for your customers, your clients.
Yeah.
And we find that no matter whether it's a $150, $200 U-lock or a $20 U-lock, if it's it's left out in the weather and it's not somehow protected, either however it's set up, that moisture can't go down into the mechanism, it's going to be it's a challenge, because I don't think there's any way you can probably make it self-lubricating or permanently lubricated or whatever that there may be. But there's new materials out there every day that are available for that, greases and synthetic lubricants. But that's definitely a problem that we deal with every day. A student is, and I love your idea of no key, because that's the other thing is your client will do is they're very impatient, and as soon as they turn the lock and it doesn't go right away, they break the key off. So then you have another problem. But
yeah, related to that, I'm sorry, were you going to?
Well, I was going to just say one thing. The other thing about theft is you realize that the biggest theft deterrent is the bike itself, that it's clunky and identifiable enough that nobody wants it. Washington Bike Share, I think their theft, it was only, they just said at the meeting, it was like 2 bikes or something last year.
I mean,
while it's important, I don't know that you'd want to put a tremendous amount of effort into that, more into your system and perfecting the RFID, and because a lot of people are concerned about, I read your part about their information being on that chip and the security of that chip. I know there's a lot of paranoid people on this campus that they worry about registering their bike because Big Brother's going to be tracking their bike
or their
somehow.
stalker, or legitimate.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
that is still
Yeah,
a
I mean, I'm not saying
safety issue too. But yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I have 2 things related to what Michael just said. The first being locks being prone to weather issues. Locks are also prone to user error. So to an extent, yeah, you can sacrifice ease of use in the interest of maybe a little bit more education, and then you don't have to worry so much about how complicated is this lock. So user error and weather issues are the two things. So user error is what I'd like to add to what Michael said. He and I actually spoke a little bit earlier, and we mentioned that it's important that the mechanism, the locking mechanism, be protected. And you all, of course, already know that the technology needs to be protected, but the locking mechanism itself. So even if you're not able to have bikes stored in covered areas, and I assume that there will be out. Designing the lock in a way that you can mitigate some of the weather-related damage is something to consider. Related to security, yes, I agree 100% with Michael. That's the most important thing. So I'm not sure how this might be marketed to the universities, but if it is supported as this gemstone program and as something that targets University of Maryland students, which I assume that it is, that's probably how you'll be enrolling. Being in compliance with whatever the university's requirements are is something that you should get started on at this point. That's something that could become a very real roadblock. So I don't know if you've made any progress on that or if that's something that you would consider, but for sure it is something. It could be nothing. I have no idea, since we haven't quite stepped through that yet with the Capital Bike Share efforts, but for sure it's something to consider, because you never know what might not be allowed by our president's office. Yes, also related to locking, it would be wonderful if the locks could not possibly be, if the bikes could not possibly be locked to anything other than a bike rack. For example, a tree or railing. The railing thing is probably a little bit challenging, but it's more of an issue that Michael and I have. These bikes should, they will end up being visible, I imagine, by design, and it's important that they be representing biking in the most honorable type of way, so that they be locked correctly to things that they should be locked to. Okay, let's see, what else do I have?
Any responses to those comments?
Oh yeah,
so
do you
far?
have anything so far?
For the locking to just bike rails, that's actually something that I personally hadn't thought of, but could be implemented just by looking at location, looking at last user, and maybe like having them sign off at the beginning saying, I will not do this, and then we would be able to tell if the GPS location lines up to something other than a bike rack, then we could say, okay, this user had it last, this user parked it here, and we can go enforce that. That wasn't something that we thought of earlier, but a good comment.
And actually related to that as well, we've been working on Michael, I say we, it's all Michael. We've been working on managing an inventory of all of the bike racks. How many do we have? How many bike spots do we have on
About
campus?
4,500.
So, of course, the geolocation, the GPS location of the bicycles should, be very precise. But I can envision it becoming a problem that somebody would lock a bike to a very tiny little rack location in an alcove in an alleyway behind some tiny building that nobody knew existed. And that being a deterrent, I wouldn't say this is a huge problem, but certainly it's something you might consider. I don't know. I'm not so concerned about it, but it is something to think about. There are tiny racks in places you would never ever guess.
That's on the GIS map done now.
Oh yeah.
Everything is on the GIS. All the racks are located on the GIS map with pictures, and also the bike repair stations, which don't exactly relevant to what you're doing here, but everything is on the GIS map now, on that layer. So as up to date as we can keep it. We keep adding racks every day.
With regard to the interest survey, there's interest, I can tell you that. So the capital bike share comparison, as I already said, it doesn't exist yet. But you could still ask, you could inquire about capital bike share users in DC, obviously not on campus, but in DC, even one-time users. That's it's an option, and also in Europe. I mean, many of our students are international or have gone abroad, and so they might easily have had some experience abroad. So those are other ways to access people with bike share who might have bike share input, specific bike share input. Let's see. You're mentioning how you will find people to survey, target nearby apartment complex residents. So to the point that the bike share system should be finding people who are not currently cycling and get them to ride bikes. There's a whole network of students who live well within the range of bicycling zone who maybe are currently taking Shelley UM, but could easily be converted to a bike share system. So that's another target group that you should definitely look to access. Oh, and also the bike shop. The bike shop has a lot of information about people who are interested in biking, and oh yeah, of course, people who are interested in biking and who are they are part of the rental program. So either through the semesterly rental program, or even for one-time trips. So that's another demographic of existing cyclists to an extent, but clearly people who don't actually own bicycles. So you would get information about why they don't own a bicycle and why they're so happy to be renting bikes, using somebody else's bicycle. Let's see, what else do I have?
Do you have another question?
I'm going to be very, very brief. So.
Oh, the design of the focus group. I'll start reading at the beginning. For the first portion of the session, the team will direct conversation regarding the students' current opinion and feelings towards capital bike share. Nix that out and include current feelings toward biking in their role as a motorist, in their role as a pedestrian, and in their role as a bicyclist. Like I said, I said this repeatedly now, but there are different ways to target people and how they feel about biking. And it's relevant what motorists think about cyclists, no matter what. For the purpose of a bike share, it's still relevant. It's not obviously relevant, but it is relevant. Let's see. The data analysis focus group. I've got a note here. Oh, focus groups are great for card sort activities. So we all have some preconceived ideas for what we think might be included in a successful bike share program. A card sorting activity that will allow you to kind of dictate how people respond. So you will become experts. So it's a great opportunity to kind of feed people what you're hoping to do in a way, and also to identify barriers and benefits that people who are not currently cyclists might not even realize existed. So certainly, I'm sorry, do you all know what a card sort is? So you write down on cards little bits of information, then people get to sort according to priority. So the group could do this together, or individuals could do it. So it's a good way to get information from participants. Locking mechanisms. talked a little bit about the design of the bike. Capital bike share bikes are ugly, but they're also not so friendly in terms of riding up hills. Not so relevant to what you're doing, but it is something to think. It's another reason why they're ugly, because of how they need to be designed for the program. But I won't spend more time on that. Well,
Actually, do you mind if I make a quick comment?
Oh, please.
That's actually kind of an issue we're thinking about. From what we know of the campus is that most of the housing is uphill, most of the classes are downhill, and from the live review, we've seen that a lot of bike shares have trouble that people ride downhill and then leave the bikes there.
Yeah, I have a note
So
on that.
that definitely
soon.
comes into our thinking.
Yeah. So rebalancing is what that feature is called. I might have passed my note already. I'll find it in a second though. Have you heard of the term to gamify something? So there you can incentivize different acts. Oh, so you have, great.
We didn't put it into our proposal, but in our talks, initially hashing out this idea, it was almost like, could we set up some kind of point system where students would get points if they brought it back to North Campus, things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I won't talk on that anymore.
Well, I would like to hear your feedback there, because that's something that we talked about and we had no idea how to address, like how to make it part of our project, because it felt like it was like the next stage, like when this would actually be implemented.
Yeah, well, so you should definitely incentivize it. So Capital Bike Share, I mean, I think you did address it in this, that they've got trucks that must be driven around to rebalance throughout each of the rack locations, and that is still an issue with this type of rack setup. You should incentivize it. And that's something that I personally really wanted to try and tackle with the Capital Bike Share program that is coming eventually. But their technology isn't really set up for it, and we have some other kind of baseline issues that we are working through still. But first, I mean, longer term, we could incentivize it through, yes, some kind of point system, and then a reward through Bike UMD. That's something that we would happily support. Maybe not a helmet. Maybe, actually, that's kind of relevant. I think a free helmet would be great for people who don't already have helmets, or, I mean, a T-shirt. I don't know what people would really want, but for sure there are ways to kind of leverage resources throughout different. I mean, the Office of Sustainability would probably be able to throw some. I certainly am not in a position to speak for them, but I am going to. You know, I'm sure they'd be happy to throw something, and this is certainly within the scope of what they're doing on campus. So just little incentives. And I mean, when you gamify something, you're engaging a demographic that is kind of doing it for the love of the game as much as they are for whatever reward they might be receiving. So, stickers and points, bragging rights. Maybe you could start little teams of rebalancers, and we had discussed having specific employees through DOTS and through Bike UMD that might be able to rebalance. Then we'd have some kind of master key, but that's kind of, it's a broader concept too. But I mean, at the beginning, for sure, just tiny little incentives and urging people to do it because they want to have a successful program should be compelling.
Okay, let's see. Just build off incentives, actually. So thinking about your survey design and in your budget, I didn't notice you thinking about any incentives, but why would I, as a person who randomly got drawn to complete your survey, why would I spend 10 or 15 minutes of my time doing that?
We had the incentives in the budget until very recently, and then we very recently found out that we can't use budget that we get from grants or gemstone money to incentivize people. Yeah, so we took that out, but we're still thinking about maybe pizza or something that we can afford on our own.
And there's ways you can. So who's your financial liaison? Tim. He's not here. A delegate for Tim this semester. Work with Vicky. There are ways you can do money on Terrapin Express. So there are some things you can do. It just you can't offer gift cards.
Yeah.
But there are other ways you can do incentives.
I mean, even pulling through the food truck, you can get vouchers for free meals, or there are lots of campus departments that might be willing to invest. I don't know what their business operations would say about that, but I can speak for DOTS and say that yes, they would certainly invest in some kind of incentive. I think that I did have a note in here about maintenance in general, bike maintenance, and also maintenance of the locking system. Michael and I were chatting on the way over here, and he did address that this is the concept that you're working toward for the locking. So the bike maintenance isn't maybe as big a factor at this moment, but certainly is something that is a factor. Especially, it would depend on what the bike design ended up being and how that played into the locking mechanism, or however it might be locked, and also how that plays in with where the RFID chip device would be. And but for sure, if you are using bikes that have gears, those gears, the parts will require maintenance, and having some kind of setup for people to report when a bike is out of service or what's specifically wrong with it, you know, where the nearest repair stand is if somebody wants to attempt to fix it themselves. Not totally relevant, again, to what you're actually working towards, but, you know, bigger bike share topics. That's all I have from my notes, at least. I hope it wasn't too much.
Any reactions to any of that?
It's great, a bunch of stuff to run with.
Yes, thank you very much.
Things to think about, right? Michael, you
I
got
actually have a question.
Oh,
Quick.
yeah.
So you guys said that you guys wouldn't want people locking bikes to like trees and besides anything but bike racks. But would you guys be opposed to locking bikes to like bikes that are a part of the bike share system? So say like the rack is like full, but you have one bike that's like a part of the bike share system. Could you lock a bike to that bike? Would you guys be opposed to that?
That's funny. I mean, practically no, because it's another bike. But the consideration in that case would be the spacing between the racks and accessibility to, an individual who's unaffiliated with the bike share being able to access and efficiently and safely and cleanly remove their bike from rack. So it's not really a matter of security. We don't care, you know, if it's you and your friend will lock your bike together, it's not really our business. But in terms of rack maintenance and clutter and use, then that would be a consideration. So I don't know I mean, you've seen bikes locked to other bikes. How it depends. There are different standards for how the rack areas are designed and how far apart the actual.
Because of limited space on campus, we've had to go to the national standard. Minimum standard is 30 inches between hoops. We went to 36. Now, not every rack in campus is that, but that's now the campus standard, so you will see that happening. There's not a whole lot of room once you put two bikes in between two hoops. That's pretty much it. So if you start trying to put another bike in there, you can fit them on the end, of course, but what we see happening is it starts to get to be a jumble. And that's something we're trying to prevent by providing more rack space. But a lot of times we'll provide more rack space, and I'm getting off topic and I apologize. We'll put it here, and because somebody doesn't want to walk 50 feet, there'll be empty racks here and there'll be a jumble over here. So campus policy is supposed to be on a bike rack, first of all, to tell you that. It's not supposed to be on a tree. The arborist gets upset. It's on railings. The fire marshal gets upset, and I hear about all that. And then you may lose a bike because we'll have to cut it and take it away. But I don't think what you're suggesting would be a huge problem. I don't think as we continue to add spaces that's going to be even something you have to consider, because there should be spaces. Hopefully, we're adding, you know, probably close to 100 a month. So I mean, if we had more space, we'd add more. The new building, the new classroom building on Campus Drive is going to have 504 parking spaces for bikes. And it's going to have showers and lockers. So we're making progress there with the planners and architects too. So there'll be a lot more bike accommodations on campus moving forward. We're getting resident life to make more accommodations because there's woefully inadequate bike racks at most residence halls, which causes the overcrowding on campus spaces, which are supposed to turn over 4 to 6 times a day. And if there's a residence hall bike sitting there for 2 weeks, that's creating another backlog of, you know, shortage of spaces. So we're working on all that, but you know, this is the worst time in the world to try to work on anything because there's no money. At least that's the answer you get from everybody. So, but I don't want to take too much of your time. I appreciate being invited. Just to give you an update on the bike share, unfortunately that was College Park, that seeing through rose-colored glasses, February. We never figured sooner than August. August was our target date, and now with the bankruptcy of Bixby.
Are you all familiar with that? The vendor, the station vendor?
We can fill you in later. I don't think we need to take.
No, I just wanted to make sure we
yeah, the original vendor, that's not actually the manufacturer, but the original vendor has a lot of patents and licenses, has filed for bankruptcy, Chapter 7, I'm pretty sure it is. So that's going to complicate things for quite a while. There's $39 million in debt, so I don't think anybody's going to be buying them real soon. I would not, because you predicate a lot of your things on getting like results of what the students thought of the bike share and things like that. I would not think that even barring a miracle, Christmas, and that would be a miracle. Now, we are investigating going to this SOBI system, but I don't think that's going to happen.
It's not going to happen.
Because the state is really like totally locked into Alta, so it'll probably just be extended and extended. But don't count on any data from that unless you want to go to Monroe. Wait a minute, what is it?
Montrose.
No, there's a
Shady Grove.
George Mason has a bike station, a peripheral on the Washington State system. There's a couple of universities I think that have like a station or two.
There is value for sure. I don't know how much time. Sorry to interrupt you,
That's
Michael.
all right.
There's certainly
used to it.
value. That's true. There's value in doing some research among universities that have something similar going on, and also in the bike share systems that exist elsewhere in Maryland. I mean, in Silver Spring and Rockville and Bethesda, those locations are so suburban to an extent that it's not a total alignment with what you would see on a college campus, but for sure it's an atypical design for a bike share system, and so they, I'm sure, have had unique challenges that could apply in this setting too, or maybe could lead you in a direction to tackle some other challenges in terms of use, at least functionality.
Well, I know they looked at George Mason, and they also looked at the University of California, Irvine in detail.
Okay. Shady Grove is now got a bike share station, University of Shady Grove. They just got it when Montgomery County went online. So just wanted to give you an update on that. And then since you're short on funding, which everybody is, we might be able to help. Whatever we can help you with, just give me a call.
Yeah,
but
in terms of
we
data,
can give you locks and things like that. Not new locks, but we can give you locks, different locks that we've already destroyed that you can test rather than have to spend money on a new lock. Some of those locks are $200. I can give you a $200 lock that I destroyed, and you can play with it. You can just see where it cuts. Another thing is too that professional thieves also use hydraulic rams. So you'd want to take that into effect because most of the successful locks now are scaling down the open space so that you cannot fit a ram in there. Unfortunately, the tool that we have is still available, which is a rebar cutter, which goes through them like, I don't care what it is, 3 seconds, and it's cordless. So if you ever seen me on campus, I'm done, and like before a student comes up and goes, "What are you doing?" "Oh, I'll cut the lock." What do you mean? It's done. It's over. Bike's gone. So, but I can help you with that. I can help you with that type of things, and anything else that we'd be happy to help you on it. So. Thank you.
All right. The librarians have a librarian-focused questions for them?
Well, actually, a lot of the questions or feedback I had from reading through the proposal actually were similar to the folks from DOTS about survey design primarily and target groups and that sort of thing. And I think you actually addressed them better than I did because you know better target groups than I would have known. Yeah, I think just sort of finding ways to target the right people in your survey design, and I was going to suggest from a sort of social science research perspective, you're going to get into it's going to be a lot of work with your free-form responses. I know there were a few different places where you're saying, then we'll ask people about opinions for this thing, and then we're just going to get this big pile of text from all these people, or from your notes and focus groups, and that's going to be a lot to wade through. So you might want to do some looking into response coding and that kind of stuff for like sort of social science research methods to know how other people handle that. I think in your proposal you address, at least for the focus groups, doing kind of a big group whiteboard exercise with it, which at least helps minimize some of the biases from having individual coders go through that kind of stuff, but that gets tricky. So I don't know, maybe brush up on some of that stuff so you won't have to quite wade through as much of those issues. I didn't realize that the registrar offered giving out random piles of email addresses to people. Do they do that, or is that a hopeful thing, or do they actually do that? Do they?
They would give it to their mentor.
Okay. That's good. I was kind of curious about that and how they ensure randomness on that. I guess
they can pull a random. There's ways, as long as you and your IRB assure anonymity and/or confidentiality, they can release it to the PI. You can solicit inquiries, and they'll just pull a random set of a number.
Okay. And then I think from a literature review perspective, just in terms of the written proposal, just tighten it up a little bit, because you did have a few things that were sort of very interesting facts about bike shares, but maybe not particularly relevant to the lock design portion of it. And it's good that you guys have done your homework and to kind of see the usage aspects as you are trying to design surveys, but there were a few things in there about helmet use and some other stuff that I didn't see as being particularly relevant to the actual lock design. So just from sort of a writing literature review perspective, kind of, tighten it up to focus on the parts that are actually informing the thing that you're actually researching. So.
That's a good question building off of that.
Sure.
So how did you all explore, assess, and integrate scholarly resources into your proposal writing process?
Excuse me?
How did you think about your literature review and all the background? How did you search for information? How did you wade through that information? And how did you incorporate that into your proposal?
So we started, I guess, last semester. We kind of had we spent a lot of time trying to figure out what we wanted, and as we were figuring out ideas, we started looking into things and seeing what was out there. Going into the summer, we had kind of an idea that this is what we wanted to work with. So we kind of split into, I think we've split into teams a couple different times, but when we split into teams, we then set each person a goal to research a few articles and then become experts on those, and we reported back. We've kind of played around with the different methods. We used Google Drive to create a spreadsheet of what we have. And so we generated this basically big database of stuff that we've got folders of text of all of our input. And then we started, as we started coming back this semester, or last semester in the fall, we brought out what each one of us had known in some of our meetings over the summer. We also brought that out. And then that eventually was put into the paper where each subgroup had a big basis of stuff that they knew, and that was brought in. Is that kind of what you're asking, or you?
Yeah, and I definitely encourage you to talk to Jim Miller, who's the patent librarian and a past Gemstone team librarian I think he holds the record for most Gemstone teams that he worked with. But he is an expert, and the patents would certainly help your team, and I think add to some of the scholarly information that I think we were looking for in the proposal. That will help you as you move forward to the next steps in both the testing and also into your final thesis.
And I think I did meet with a subgroup of the group. We talked at least a little bit about patents, and I didn't see as much of that coming through in the proposal. I didn't know what your final results were with that, I guess. So.
I guess the way I really saw us using our scholarly resources in the methodology section, where we'd get to a point, came up with another question we needed answered, and then we'd go find the answers, particularly for the methodology as how are we going to accomplish this. So we looked for, I guess, more instructional material, kind of, but I appreciate that we need to go back and look at what all has been done in order to really move forward with the design.
Okay, kind of following up on the writing of the proposal itself, and as you go into the tightening up phase of it, you can tell it's been written by 17 different people with lots of different paragraphs shoved together, which is where everything starts. That's great. But it really isn't to a point where it's ready for public consumption where it is now, because there's a lot of different voices in there, and there's a lot of different, there's even commentary that people have put in, well, have you ever thought about this, which is still in there in places. So just
I'll send it to you.
And there's little places in there where the rich background of the problem of, throwing bikes in the river in Paris is good, but it comes out of the blue. It really needs some context to why that's important to waste, not waste, but use words on. And then the follow-up, that I think was the next sentence about, but a lot of them are shipped to North Africa. And so I'm just floundering around. That's why we went from Paris to North Africa, and is this legal or illegal, and is it against the law to throw my bike in the river? Well, probably, I don't know if it is or not. So just, those are great, enriching depth comments, but make sure they're prepared. You prepare the reader to absorb them as they should be. That's very general. So it's you're well on the way to a very nice product, and this will be the core of your thesis, right? The first half of the thesis. So make sure you clean up now while it's fresh, and don't try to clean up 2 years from now when you don't want to come back and do this stuff again. Okay, that's very general. On your presentation, I noticed on one slide there's a term called a Sharpie test. On one slide, I read it. I didn't hear anything about it.
It was on the locking slides.
And just in general, I'll ask you a very specific question: is what the heck's a Sharpie test? And I don't really care what the answer is, but
I care.
in general, if you're going to draw my eyes to something on the slide that's as specific as that, at least mention that. So what's a Sharpie test?
So the Sharpie test, when we were thinking about trying to emulate how people try to break into locks, we were trying to find tests that would sort of act the same way as people do in real life. So one of the ways that people would break into locks is just like through hammers and like impact. So the Sharpie test is it's like a controlled way to have the same amount of impact testing on the material. So it's pretty much just a pendulum, and it's just released from the same height, mass, everything, so everything's controlled, so you get the same impact at the same point every single time. So we were trying to, it was going to be like an example of how we could control like a real world situation so that we can test, like, I guess, like the properties or the merits of our lock as we design it.
So it'll give you a measure of relative strength.
Yeah.
Against a certain constant force.
Yeah, so we can get like different properties from it.
That's fine. That's great. Just say that. Okay. And that's just a general when you're presenting, is make sure that you don't confuse me by showing me something and not weaving it into your dialogue.
And actually, I think that's a really good piece for your methodology, because you have a lot of, we're going to test this, but I still wasn't actually sure what your data is, and I think you're still trying to figure that out, whether that's with your survey or with your lock testing. So as you're going forward, make sure you're specific of, you know, what are your variables from the survey, and what are the indicators of strength for your lock, and how will you know that your geolocation is successful, so that when you're saying you're going to test something, we know what you're testing a little bit more specifically, so it could be replicated. And that comes with time. You may not know some of that now because you haven't developed your survey, or you don't know what your lock is yet. But as you come to more specifics, make sure you fill that back into your paper.
Okay. Other questions? Audience questions?
Well, I'd say they work very well as a group together. I don't have any more specific questions for them today, except that they have a hard road ahead, mainly on the technical things, in which nobody's really asked questions about. But they know what they're in for, I think.
Okay, and that's a very good point that should be read. This group of people you have outside readers today are not materials technical folks. So you need to reach out and find those individuals and beg, borrow, ask, bribe, whatever you need to do to get input, advice. Don't go blindly down these roads. You'll waste a lot of time and money. Speaking of money,
yeah,
what are you going to do if sustainability fund doesn't come through?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. I know that they've confirmed on some of the funds. Some people who were denied already know that they were denied too. So I think you guys might be in like an optimistic purgatory.
Our SL from last semester, actually, Eric, he's on the board. So we've been in contact with him.
Bribing.
He said that the big ticket items are done, like the big ones.
Yeah.
He hopes to get to ours by March 20th. I think that was the date he gave us. He said he'd let us know by then, I think. And latest was April 15th-ish.
Okay, so you didn't bribe Eric well enough, let's say, and you come up on the negative side of that. Where are you going to get your $4,000 from?
We're in the process of looking into that, but
Great answer.
I think I was actually roaming through biking sites at one point, and I found some of like the larger, like nationwide, I guess, organizations for bicyclists have tabs about receiving funding for different bicycling projects. These projects are usually small community projects, but I think if we could explain that this is something that is designed to benefit the University of Maryland community, we would have a leg to stand on in applying for at least part of that funding through them.
You always are looking for that next dollar, so you're doing the right thing. You know what your primary goal is right now. March, you'll know, but in the meantime, be looking for plan B, plan C, plan D, and your price tag's relatively low, so you should be able to finance this thing.
The Anacostia Heritage Trails, the acronym is ATHA, ATHA. it's a good place to go looking for money. Aaron Markovich, I can give you his information later if you want, is a resource for sure. I don't know what the expectation is from grant seekers and support on campus, but Ed Kenny, who works for Student Affairs, is somebody to consider reaching out to. He has sent me some opportunities for grants, and I would be happy to share some of that with you too, since it works well with our mission. So somebody can reach out to me, and I'll try and connect. So I'm not sure what the expectation is from the Student Affairs Development Office is with regard to helping specific student groups, but it's worth a shot, especially if you don't get it.
My guess is that as long as you worked with them on the grant so that you would benefit from it, then Ed would sign off. Otherwise, you probably have to go through our development person.
Okay.
But if there's a collaboration point on there where they do the research, but it influences some project you're doing, so some of the questions in the survey perhaps or something along those lines.
There may be a conflict of interest with this capital bike share, but we can look into it.
Okay. Any other questions from the people on this end of the table? Who aren't wearing blue shirts?
Well, I would say that there's a lot of kids I see riding bicycles in from some distance, and to me, one of the big problems is safety. The people don't have lights on the bikes, and they're all in black clothes, and at night you don't see them. So I think, personally, I'd like to see a little more safety involved in that. But that's the difference. They started on bike safety, and then they changed to this. So I'm happy with the
Get back to some of that kinetic energy for some lights.
Also, it used to be on campus there were a few unicycle riders. Yeah, I don't know if they're taking that into the unicycle. There used to be, it was quite interesting to watch. They were around a lot.
And we like to wrap up each of these sessions with giving the team a chance to hit us with whatever questions are on your mind, specifically about your project. Sometimes they range a little broader than that, but try to keep a focus on the topic. And while you have us here as an audience, anything you want to know or anything you want to ask us about the process?
May I interrupt with one question?
Yeah.
Before? There was some mention of restricting the distance that a bike could travel outside of a certain perimeter. Is that something that falls within the scope of what you're working on?
Yeah, it could. It depends on down the road. We have the capabilities there. It's a matter of whether or not we want to implement it.
Okay.
I think the reason we want to include that is the whole redistribution. If someone rides it out there, takes the bus back, and no one's going to get it for a month, then it'd be better to keep it within the campus or around the apartment complexes, as you mentioned.
Any questions? Suggestions?
I've got one.
Yeah.
In relation to not having bikes locked to trees and things of that sort, would you be opposed to putting clamps or something of that sort around existing bike racks so that only our bikes could clip into that, but it still wouldn't affect the use for other bikes and bikers and their locks?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't know. What do you think? What do you think, Michael? It's a fine.
It's all up to FM. It's not up to us.
Yeah, it's to an extent it's not really. It has to do with aesthetics, and the racks aren't really ours. We invest in them, but in most all locations they're not. It's not our land.
Most are campus FM property, not us.
Yeah, so
we only, and most of the ones that we get are from grants too. So it's not really ours either. Really, we don't really own anything. So. Would have to be something that FM and probably 5 other committees would have to approve as far as how they look and what they would do, and that's one of our biggest stumbling blocks is trying to get approval for some of the simplest things you would think require unbelievable sign-offs.
Yeah.
So.
But if you could identify maybe a handful of kind of primary rack locations in high traffic areas, then you could start seeking approval from the building managers in those areas, and that would help you target and have maybe more success. So identifying where there are high traffic areas is a way to kind of start working on that.
Yep. Good question. Anything else?
Part of the reason we were able to foresee such a low budget is that the design of the lock is something that you can retrofit onto a bicycle. So you could purchase a relatively inexpensive bicycle and attach it on. I'm not 100% sure how that attaching works, but that's the idea. Do you think that's something reasonable? Do you think we can purchase bikes that are low cost but still clunky enough that nobody would be interested in them? Do those exist commercially?
Oh boy, you're the bike expert.
Well, that's what I was going to suggest if you don't get money, which I hope you do, but if you don't, you might want to talk to a manufacturer about the concept of, we're going to make this for your bike. And then you might be able to get money from them for that, thinking that they're going to sell many units to many bike share operations, because they know bike share is the coming thing. You'd have to probably talk to the manufacturer. I mean, some of the manufacturers have some clunky bikes. I mean, we're actually a Fuji dealer, so we could get you Fuji bikes at a very reasonable price, and they do have some heavier bikes, which the whole idea is to make it unpalatable to steel. Basically.
No one wants to take it home.
And easily identifiable that
Right.
if they see it going down the road, anybody knows it's one of your bikes.
But it should be a compromise between function and ugliness and
Right.
clunkiness, because that would be very discouraging for especially a new cyclist who is just trying it out. I would be very discouraged if I couldn't get up a hill and be like, this bike share is not for me, and that would be the end of it. And I think, I mean, that's one of the barriers for people who don't currently cycle. It's that they don't feel like they're physically fit enough, or that the campus isn't designed with their leg strength in mind, or that their class schedule doesn't really. If you're walking from North Campus to the mall, it's uphill most of the way, and so that's that's discouraging too. So.
But you'd have to talk to the manufacturers, because if you read what I read in your proposal, unfortunately I apologize, I only got to read it today. So the successfully non-stolen bikes have special fasteners on there so that they're not easily disassembled. So if you used a Fuji bike, well, on this campus we have a lot of people that, oh, there's a part that I need, it's gone. So you would have to make sure that they could supply you with a bike that would have these special fasteners on there, and would maybe even have non-standard parts.
But that could still be manipulated by a user to fit their body, because that's another fact. I mean, you want a variety of bike sizes.
Yeah, but I'm conceding that, but the idea is that the manufacturer may be able to come up with that type of a situation, because again, they have to be dealing with the same problems, because that's bike theft bikes are considered street currency, so bike theft is a big thing. So nobody wants to put out 500 or 1,000 bikes in a bike share program and have half of them disappear in the first week. So you have to make that compromise somewhere. But one of the things is that parts aren't interchangeable, and parts are hard to remove. So, because your bike, that's going to be a thing, especially if it can be left pretty much anywhere, you're going to have to worry about that it can be left in an area that's not well lit, not well traveled, that somebody could go along and start to try to strip it. So you got to make it either that it's not worth doing it, or it's too hard to do it. Because thieves are lazy, or they wouldn't be thieves. So.
There's other ways to prevent theft and not attach to things. Like the dogs have these collars, and you put the electric thing around it. And that's something they haven't looked at, but would that be possible on the campus if they?
Well, some of the thieves have caught on to. They've caught on to the tracking things, and they know where to look for those, so they hide the tracking things. So a lot of times now, because some people have tried to use that, police have tried to use that, and we've actually had some of this campus police bait bikes stolen and not recovered because they just disappeared off the signal stop. So there may be other ways, but thieves get. Yeah, we have bait bikes. Yeah, because we have a. It's not significant statistically, but we do have a pretty good bike, because a lot of our students are careless, don't properly lock the bike, don't use the right type of locks. Too busy to lock the bike up. The lock's on the bike, but the bike's not locked.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. I do have a kind of a question related to the RFID technology. So I was just learning about this when I read it, but in terms of the different ways that the ID signal the signal can be tampered with, is there a way to account for whatever the technology is on the bike and whatever RFID technology exists on the human that's authorized to take the bike, that those two things must remain in close proximity for the duration of the ride or for something like that? I don't know how that fits into technology, but is that something?
That can very possibly be arranged.
I'm not sure, maybe the wheels would lock after, or?
I think it'll depend what kind of RFID we end up going with. At the moment, we're looking into ones that are really, really low power, so that they only need to be able to read whatever, essentially, so the smart lock, or like a smart trip card,
right,
that you touch on it, like right at the moment. But they have ones that aren't too much more power that could probably, I mean, what would that range be? I think we had discussed having some of the tech, like, inside of the main pole of the, like, that goes underneath the seat. I mean, that would be a pretty short distance, but it would all depend on where we finally end up placing it. I mean, like a meter, you can get ones with pretty low power consumption that can read out to a meter. So that's definitely a possibility.
Or you could, I don't know if you could design something on the bicycle where you know, depending on what,
like
a slot that you could just, affix your, whatever the signal was being sent from.
Yeah.
And then outside of that, maybe you could alarm the bike. So the moment they became, if the bike was in motion and the signals weren't in close enough proximity, then everybody would know you'd stolen that bike. Or they would think you were a carnival rider or something. I don't know. I stole this bike. You should have, that's what it should, the alarm should say. Bike thief. Yeah.
Also, the range of the reader was one of our most security issue, because depending on how long the range can read, that means that other people can get to that signal as well. So that's why we were trying to get to the shortest range possible.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else from the team? No?
I still have one question. You mentioned that the university was going to have requirements, and I don't know what those would be, and who do they see to
I have
find
no
these out?
idea. This was more things I could imagine happening to me like a week before I needed to get something done, and I was hoping to try. I don't know what the university does have in place in terms of security and what student information can be available. We, through this process of trying to establish the Capital Bike Share program on campus, had been trying to even work through having UIDs or some kind of authentication process through Capital Bike Share with the university information, and I wonder if there might be some limitation if it's a gemstone project and it's already affiliated with the university and they're targeting the university students, and maybe it's not a technical requirement, but it might be one that's in good faith, or for sure students should be made aware of what security breaches they might be subjecting themselves to. So maybe there's like a legal document that would need to be authorized for anybody who would be participating in this type of a bike share. But I can't speak to anything in particular. Just kind of thinking out loud.
All right. Anything more? All right. Thank you very much, Bikes.
Good job.
Thank you so much for
Thank you. Yes.